Hello, my name is Hamlet Dobbins, and this is Memphis Material, an oral history project chronicling the stories of the visual arts in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Material is a podcast celebrating the personal histories, the intimate stories, and the studio practices of some of the people who help shape the creative landscape of our city. These unedited interviews are all recorded at the Memphis Listening Lab, an archival gem located in the majestic Crosstown Concourse in beautiful Midtown Memphis. The website for Memphis Material was designed by the wonderful Brian Dixon. Now, we don't really have sponsors for this show, but if we did, today's episode would be sponsored by artists doing things that you didn't really expect. Now, again, today's interview is part 2 of 2 interviews that we did with the great Don Estes. It was recorded on November 15th, 2024. Enjoy the interview. Okay, so I was listening to it right as I came in, and we finished up where we were talking about how you came into South Main and how you were down there with Rob McGowan, and then the sort of the origins of the building and how you were working in the building and you were doing the furniture fabrication and the metalwork fabrication as well. And one thing I was wondering about, you were sort of talking about the area down there being totally different. When you noticed, when was it that you noticed the change for it to become kind of an arts neighborhood or sort of an arts district?
I think when Jay Etkin opened up his gallery, that helped a lot. Rob had the center going. So he, that was, I can't remember what year exactly Jay got down there, but when he opened, it helped a lot because he had openings, and a lot of times he would have them on the same night as Rob's openings, and that got a lot of people down there.
Now, talk to me a little bit about the Memphis Center for Contemporary Art. That's for sure one of those points that comes up a lot in our conversations when I'm doing this project, and I'm curious to hear your observations of it, your understanding of it, and kind of how it worked in your place in that story.
Rob was I think I mentioned Rob was one of my professors at the university, ceramics professor. And so we were pretty good friends. I had been to his house in Midtown. And so when he told me that he was buying this building, I said, man, that's a great idea, So I was, I think I told you the story about him and the BBC.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, after all that was going on, he started, he wanted to put a gallery up in his first floor, but they were parking their cars in there and didn't really have space for it. And so then when he bought the building next door, there was a guy, it was Nick's, he sold dry goods and plates and dishes to I guess he got them all from the public schools or something. It was an institutional kind of Chinaware, and he would sell that. He'd sit there and just kind of hold court with the few people in the neighborhood. So Rob and I'd sit over there and talk to Nick, and when he finally closed, Rob and Annie decided to buy his building, and so with the intent that he wanted to put an art center in there, a gallery.
Now, what was he, in terms of thinking about Rob's goals initially, you were probably privy to a lot of those conversations and a lot of that thinking. Yeah. What did he have in mind in terms of an art space?
He just wanted to show contemporary artists, and most of them from Memphis, and he set it up. I can't remember if he actually got through the paperwork on setting up a nonprofit or not. That's a little foggy. But he ran it for several years, and it got to be a pretty big deal. He got, And also the newspaper, Frederick Keppel was the art critic for the newspaper, and wrote every week about something, which was a big plus. As far as I'm known, nobody does that anymore in Memphis. And so Frederick could cover and take pictures, and it'd be in the commercial appeal. It got a lot of coverage. And so it started to grow in recognition. There weren't a lot of commercial galleries. There was Alice Bingham and Jay Etkin. And when Jay Etkin opened his gallery, that helped bring a lot of people down. So it was a good thing. It was we'd have great openings. And
now, what were some of the shows that you remember down there? I mean, for me, it was such a interesting place because I had never been in that neighborhood before.
Yeah.
And I remember going there as an undergrad, and I remember for sure one of the things that's kind of become a part of my story is that I remember going in there and recognizing that I was sort of surrounded by my people, and I felt at home. Yeah. Even though everyone was sort of radically different in their own way, I remember there was this really beautiful sort of group, kind of a group excitement about what was on the walls and what was going on in the space, and then being there with those people. What are some things that you remember about some of those early shows?
Just the diversity of people I didn't realize were doing that much art in Memphis. There was just a lot of people doing a lot of different things. As far as individual shows, I don't really pick one out. He had a lot of group shows, so there was a lot of people involved and got to show there. And I remember he had a performance piece by a guy named John. I can't remember his last name, but he was doing a performance piece, and I can't remember exactly how he managed to do it, but he banged his head somehow on the floor or hit a hammer or something. He was doing this complicated kind of quasi-dance movement kind of thing, and he slipped and he fell and cracked his head open. It started bleeding pretty profusely, and the audience was at first thinking, "Is this part of the deal?" And so people were just like staring at him, but nobody was helping him. And so finally, I think it was Robert that actually went over there and realized he was bleeding and he was hurt, and he ended up being okay, but he was kind of knocked out for a minute. And the crowd all of a sudden got quiet, and finally when Rob saw the blood, he went over there, and everybody realized this was not part of the deal.
Right. It's funny, like so many parts of art are about the urban legend around it, like what happened to Vincent van Gogh's ear, like that kind of stuff. Right. And that story, I was there too, but I remember it completely differently. Yeah. And it's so funny, like I think maybe 2 or 3 people have talked about it so far, and I think like...
His name was John Chiamonte, does that sound familiar?
Yeah, but now the way I remember it was that it was a big kind of installation sculpturally kind of thing. Right. And there was a window pane in there. Yeah. And he smashed his hand through the window pane.
That's right, yeah.
And when he did, he cut his arm. And that was my first performance art experience.
Right.
And I remember it was the same thing as you. It was like, and then everybody else there, we were all just kind of standing there like, oh yeah, this is what people do, during performance art things, because I've heard about this, but I've never seen it.
When he cut his arm, he fell over.
Okay.
And that's, I think, when he banged his head, too.
Okay. But I remember he was bleeding, and I remember he said...
it was bleeding pretty bad.
He was like, okay, guys, I'm sorry. He sort of broke character and said, I didn't mean to do that, so I'm going to go to the hospital now, or something like that. It was very charming and kind of strange.
I was kind of back in the back trying to, get everything else arranged.
Right.
And so I didn't have a really good view of what was going on.
Right. But, that's so funny, because that's got to be one of the few...
I forgot about him punching the glass.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
And then, for me, too, one of the shows that I remember was Greeley and Larry's show about Dante's Inferno.
Right.
Like, I remember I had been around them a bunch, at school, and I remember that I think maybe they had gotten a grant or something to work on this project for Larry to, frame all these massive drawings.
Right.
And it was kind of a big culmination of this project that they had done together.
Right.
I remember that show being really, really great. How did Rob know all these people? Was it just through being an artist in town, or would he?
Well, he taught at the university, so he taught. He was the only ceramics person at that time, and ceramics was in the same building with the sculpture department. So he was, on the faculty. So he knew everybody. I mean, most of the students, a lot of the students ended up taking at least one ceramics class just to fill in their schedule, And I really kind of took to it, so I took a lot of ceramics. And anything I could to fill up the schedule, I would take a ceramics class. So, he was just a real encouraging. He was a good artist. His art was really strong, I thought. And I always try to talk him into getting away from the round plate form, but he was just stuck in it,
And they were so good.
They were so beautiful.
Yeah. Now, did you keep in touch with Rob after he left South Main?
Yeah, pretty much. I bought my building, right? I bought the building in '90, and he and Annie were just starting to have problems. And by the time I actually moved in, they had left. Annie, Rob had left, and Annie still lived there for a little bit. And so, yeah, that was a tough time because I was, good friends with both of them. I just felt really bad about it. But by that time, it was Rob and I were walking around the street one night when I saw the building go for sale. The guy was literally putting the for sale sign on the building right across the street from Rob. And, because we were walking up and down Main Street looking for a building. And there was one farther down that Prince Mongo ended up buying. But I tried to buy that one. And I wasn't really excited about it. It wasn't really what I wanted, but it was a building. It was affordable. But Mongo ended up getting a contract on it. So we were walking around, and I just saw this huge 3-story warehouse, which I had, no desire to have something that big, but I started talking to the guy who said he wanted $100,000 for it. So, I had $8,000 to my name at the time, but I convinced Henry Turley actually was a big help. He when I went to get a bank loan on the building, we didn't talk about this story before.
Nope.
I was recently talking to somebody. I couldn't remember if it was you or who, but I went to the NBC Bank and talked to a banker that I had found this building. I wanted to buy it. And I told the banker, I said, now there's this guy in town named Henry Turley. And I don't know if you know him or not. The banker was just kind of smiling. And I said, I think Henry might be interested in the building. And the banker said, well, Henry's on our board of directors. And if he wants the building, it's his. And I got all kind of just, oh, man, I shouldn't have mentioned that, And so he said, well, we'll be glad to help you, but we've got to talk to Henry about this. And a couple of days later, I got a call. I'd never really met Henry before, but I got a call, and he said, this is Henry Turley. And I thought, oh, boy, He said, I've got a lot of other projects going on, and I don't really need that building right now. So if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. And I was just like, wow. So I went back to the bank and told the banker the story, and he immediately made a phone call. And he says, yeah, well, let's do it. So with my $8,000 deposit, I bought that building.
Now, what kind of shape was it in?
Well, it was still occupied by the machinery company that was in there. And Mr. Meadows, who ran the machinery company, his office was a little white building next door, which is gone now. And so I went over there and told him it was still full of machinery. And went over and told him I'd bought the building, and I just needed to clear out the first floor for my shop, so my employees could go in there and start building. And I said, I'm no rush for you to get the machinery out, just move it. So he got the forklift, and he came and put all of his machinery out on the loading dock that was in the area I was going to use. I just sat there, I had an awning over it. So sat there for months and months, And I moved my shop in there and got to work. And, it was later, about 6 months or so after that I realized, why am I paying rent down in Midtown for an apartment? And I had just gotten custody of my daughter at the time through our divorce settlement. And I thought, I can go down there and build an apartment. So I just went up. I kept going up to the third floor and looking around. It was just, the third floor was completely empty. And it was just this big, empty, 8,000 square foot floor. So on weekends, every weekend, my daughter and I go down there and just start building, put up walls. And she had a friend at school. She was in, I guess, 7th grade at that time, or 6th grade, maybe 6th grade. And I guess she was more like 4th grade. It was a long time ago. She was pretty young, but anyway, they did have a softball team. And she went to Catholic high, or Catholic school. And her best friend's father and I taught the softball team and the basketball team. These little girls, And so it turned out he was an electrician. And so I told him what I was doing with the building. I said, the only wiring in the building, the only lighting in the building is a row of knob and tube bare wire light bulbs. That's it. There's no outlets. There's nothing. And he said, well, I'm an electrician. I'll come over and help you. So in the evenings, we came over there, and he'd come over there, and he taught me how to bend conduit and run. He taught me how to wire everything to code, and we just did it. So.
Now, what about, this story of you being the single artist, living in this big warehouse with a sixth grade, 7th grade girl, and obviously we have to do the things that we have to do, because that was what was going on in life. But I'm curious, how was it for you to have a kiddo and be trying to navigate all of this and be thinking about yourself as an artist at the same time?
Well, like I said, I was building furniture full time. So at one point, I had about 10 employees. It was not a small operation, a tiny operation. It was small, but I had two welders, 2 woodworkers, and I had about 4 girls in the paint department, because we did antique painted faux finishing, that kind of stuff. We did metal, wrought iron chandeliers, wrought iron beds. We did everything, So I had a full metal shop and a full woodworking shop, and then a whole paint department to do all the finishing.
Right.
So once I got that building, it grew pretty quick. I went from just me and one guy to about 8 people.
Now, how was it that, just in terms of thinking about how you have a small business that suddenly goes from one guy to 10 people, was it just a particularly robust time in furniture fabricating?
Well, yeah, there was a couple other people doing it, and one of the other persons that were doing it, I was partners with for a little while. We started out at a little building over on Barksdale, and we did that for about a year or two, and we had a lot of customers, interior designers, basically, and he was working for another guy that did faux finishes and antique repair, and he was living in that guy's back house, And so he and Joe Neerman, that was the guy's name, they started their own business, and Mike and I kind of split up, and I started my business, and they had theirs, but we had lots of the same customers and a lot of the same designers. Mm-hmm. So that's how we both got our start. And I'm not sure what Mike's doing now. They eventually moved to Maryland, to Annapolis, and their company got really big. Mm-hmm. You know, they had probably 20 or 30 employees.
Now, how long was it before you started doing second floor contemporary? Or when was it that you decided to make an exhibition space?
I did that in 1999. So it was about 9 years after I bought the building that I'd started that. You know, the Center for Contemporary Art had closed. Robert and Annie were gone. Jay was still open. And I had this old second floor that I had John Jones, architect. He was renting from me, and Coleman Coker, who was a big influence and a big part of the, you know, had a lot to do with MCCA and helped a lot there, and was a pretty well-known architect. And so he was all for it, and we had this, he had an office on the second floor, and John Jones had an office on the second floor, but the rest of the building, you know, each floor is 8,000 feet, so we had a big space left over. And talked to, you know, Coleman was enthusiastic about it, and John was cool with it, and so we kind of built walled in John's open area so to have more wall space and give him a private door. And Coleman was farther down past the gallery space. And so I took the rest of the floor, and I just, you know, started building I built a big sliding wall that would kind of block the gallery off from Coleman's space. And, you know, just we used the brick walls to hang, and I built some, you know, other walls. And it just kind of started that way. And I had a couple of shows before we officially became the second floor contemporary. And then Anna Santier, I don't know if do you remember her? Mm-hmm. She was helping me do it. She was really good at, you know, getting the space figured out and all that. Mm-hmm. So we decided, I said, you know, maybe we should just make this a nonprofit, because we were getting donations and all that, but we couldn't really, it was hard to raise money, you know, to get support. So I said, so she and I kind of started looking at it, and I knew nothing about how to form a business other than, you know, my furniture business. But we got a prospectus from Robert helped a lot. The way he never really became a nonprofit, I don't think, but he had started some paperwork in it. But by the time that all was going to happen, he was getting divorced. So anyway, we did the paperwork, and I talked to the government people, the 501c3, and they were 501c3, I think it was. And they sent me all this paperwork, and I talked to people on the phone. And he said, any questions, just call us. They were really encouraging, you know. So we did all the paperwork and filed it, and next thing I know, we had our official, you know, we were a 501c3 official. We had a report. We had to do reports.
Now, what did you have in mind when you first started it? I mean, like, what was, like, for me, I mean, the reason I ask is, like, when we started Material, the goal was to make a small space, right, and make it a space where people could have their first show, and they didn't have to have a bunch of stuff, right, to show in order to make a full show. Right. And it wasn't really a rebellion against martial arts, but it was sort of we saw it as an alternative to, right, that option, on a smaller, more intimate scale. So, like, right, that was what we were thinking about for Material. So, like, what
I was thinking mostly just to replace MCCA, you know, because it was just a real, you know, when Annie and Robert and Annie got divorced and MCCA went downhill or just disappeared, it was, a lot of people missed it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm right across the street. I've got the space. Why can't I just do it here? So.
And then, and so thinking about that, I mean, I remember so many shows from that space. Among them the really great group shows. But
Yeah.
what kind of things do you think it added to your life?
I don't know that it added much to my art making because I wasn't really doing a lot of art making at that time.
Mm-hmm. But did it satisfy an itch? You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
I mean, I've always liked seeing art,
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically to keep going what Rob started, and plus I just had a lot of friends that were artists, and now they didn't have places to show, there's not many commercial galleries, and I can't remember what year David started, but I think it was about 90, maybe it was late 90s. I can't remember exactly when David started.
Well, he's got an anniversary year coming up, and I think it was 95.
95,
yeah. I think that's right. Yeah.
So there was David, and I vaguely remember Alice Bingham Gallery, but I don't remember going there much.
No.
I think by that time she might have closed and moved to New York.
Mm.
But I, of course, went to David's openings, and but it was the whole idea of Second Floor was just basically a continuation of MCCA.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was really kind of disappointed when MCCA closed.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what do you remember about those early shows? What were some of the early ones?
Early on we had I did two drawing shows, drawing part 1, drawing part 2. Those were some of the early ones, just because I hadn't lined up a bunch of artists to show yet. But artists start sending me their resumes and their slides at the time.
Now, how did you get the word out? You just sort of, I mean, because this was pre.
I just told everybody I could that got this gallery. If you want to show, let me see some pictures. And there was a lot of people I wanted to show and had lined up to show that didn't have a show after we closed, and it just it all shut down in 2005 after this accident in my building, and the resulting lawsuit and the city getting all bent out of shape and claiming that my space wasn't up to code, and it was just it just killed everything. I just had to shut down.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I mean, for me, the shows that I remember in terms of Second Floor, like I said, I really remember it might have been those drawing shows, and I remember seeing people, just like you were saying, when you went to the MCCA shows, that you didn't realize there were that many people making art. I mean, I knew there were a lot of people making art, but I don't think I had ever seen a lot of these people's work. And I remember a lot of them were professors that I had heard about through the grapevine, maybe at MCA or another institution, and they were people that I had not really seen.
Right.
And so that was really refreshing. Yeah. And then there was a lot of work that was in my brain not commercially viable, and particularly edgy and particularly strange and really sort of fun, that was outside of what we would expect to see at a museum space. And then I remember for me the main shows that are in my memory, and it's sad for everybody else, but Philip Andrew Lewis and Martina Chenal. Right. Am I saying her last name right?
Chenal, I think.
Chenal. I remember those shows being just stunning and really, really great. I have one of those blue pieces of Philip's from that show, and I remember going to see it, and I remember just thinking, man, that's a killer show.
Yeah, there was some good. She had a good show. Kim Beck, do you remember Kim Beck? She had a really good installation show with the one I remember was like all these small those white, floor fans. She had like, I don't know, 15 of them stacked up, and then she projected images through them.
Yeah.
So the fans were turning, and they were super quiet. You didn't hear the fans. You could hear the hum of the air moving when she was projecting these images of, like, one I remember was a car driving down. It was a car driving, and you'd see it through these revolving fans. It was just really fantastic installation. Mm-hmm. Tom Lee had a great show where he drew on every wall. He drew these huge drawings with charcoal on every wall in the gallery, or half the walls. I think it was Tom Lee. I can't remember if it was Tom Lee, a solo show, or if I think there was a couple other artists, but just the other day I was looking up some pictures of the gallery, and I saw that one of Tom Lee's show, and I thought, I've forgotten about that. I've got lots of photographs of the shows, and lots of photographs of people staring around at the shows. Mm-hmm. It's funny to see how young everybody looked. I was looking at a couple last week, and like, God, these people look like they're 12.
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, I think for me, one of the things that I have in my head with those shows is there was this this generosity on your part, like the words in my head say, Don gave them a chance, like those are the words that sort of live, or that pop up in my subconscious, and I remember that being such an important space, and I remember it being such a refreshing space.
Yeah.
And I remember it being really open, and in my 54-year-old memory, I remember how comfortable I felt in that space.
Yeah.
And how open it was, and also about how it felt like it was sort of it just made sense, like that it was in that building that with the huge columns and the beautiful wood floor, and it being such a gorgeous space. And then also, one of the things I really liked about it was that it felt like a lot of the people that showed there knew the space really well.
Right.
Like, I'm thinking about some of the pieces that Terry did,
right.
That were sort of inserted in the space, and then thinking about Philip's second show that he did there, where he was thinking about the space in particular.
Right.
And I think that might have been one of the early times when I started thinking about Philip as a person who was really particularly sensitive to sight. Maybe that's the way he was thinking about it too.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he was.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's become a big...
I remember Terry did a piece that she had something suspended from the ceiling, and I think she had a little plumb bob that came all the way from the ceiling down to the spot on the floor. And that she wrote the word shift on the floor, just in maybe, in 1-inch letters. So it's small, it's a 6-inch little word down on it's still there. I protected it even when I refinish my floors for now. That's because now that's my studio. That part of the gallery is now my studio. And that word shift is still protected there. And one other place she painted a copper penny on the floor, and I've saved it. It's still there. Because I refinished my floors. I didn't sand them or anything. I just revarnished them and made a spot to protect those two places. So it's kind of nice to see them in there.
Yeah, I think one of the things, if I wanted to, I could turn this project in the same way that we could turn it into a remembering the urban legend of the performance artist who cut his hand.
Right.
We could also turn this project into people's way of remembering Terry's pieces, because I mean, in the same way, they're almost like stories, they have these concrete objects that we see, that are there, but then the way we think about them, or the way that they live in my head, they almost live in the same section as poetry, you know?
Yeah, they're her pieces are always very poetic.
Yeah.
Have you seen her little show at her show?
Oh, yeah.
At the show at the Clough Hanson.
Yeah, that turned out really great.
Yeah, I got to see it last week, and that's a nice show. That's another great little gallery that, you know, we need more of, like, you know, more places like that.
Right. Now, when you were, so I remember you doing the woodworking and having the shop, but I also remember you making a lot. I remember that there was a time when you were able to shift away from, you know, being the full-time person in the wood shop to being able to make again. Yeah. What was that transition like for you?
I started painting again pretty seriously in 2003. I got a kind of out of the blue. I applied for this residency in Spain, and I got it. And I didn't really know what I was, what because there was not much documentation. I just read that there was an opening, they were accepting applications for artist residency in Spain. And so I applied for it because I had just started painting these horizontal line paintings. I started those in 2003. And I got in the New American Painting book. That was the year I got in that book. And so that helped me get this residency in Spain, which turned out to be just an incredibly great experience, but not because of the residency, because I was the only artist there.
What was it?
It was just this couple that she was from California. He was from Spain. He was born in Spain, but he lived in California for a while and met his wife, Nancy. And then they decided to move back to Spain in this little town called Torrella de Montgrí. And I remember I flew to Amsterdam, flew to Barcelona, and he picked me up at the airport in Barcelona, and we drove up to this town. It was Torrella's up toward France, and open on the coast of the Mediterranean. And I took this. He met me at the bus station, and between the two cities, I took a bus. I got off the plane, took a bus, heading up in Spain. It was about 8 o'clock at night, and he said, he had told me, he said, now, I'll meet you in this little town called Flaçà, because our town's not big enough to have a bus station.
Okay.
Or a train station. And I said, okay, so the train pulls in. I hear the conductor say Flaçà, and I'm looking at the window. It's pitch black. There's like one bare light bulb, and I don't see any lights of any town, of anything. And the train pulls to a stop, and I get off with my 2 suitcases and my backpack, or 1 suitcase and my backpack. And I get off this train, and there's a little building there with 1 light bulb on inside on the front door. And I said, that must be the train station. The train takes off, and I walk in this little, and it's basically a little bar. It had a pool table, it had a bar, and 1 guy in there, no customers. I walk in with my luggage, I sit down and have a beer, and I said, somebody's supposed to meet me here. And of course, the bartender spoke no English whatsoever. And I didn't speak much Spanish, very little Spanish. And so I just sat there and drank a beer, and I see headlights pull up. And, I said, this guy walks in, he said, Don? I said, Michael? So we get in his car, and we're driving. It's pitch black. There's no lights anywhere. There was no town of Flaçà that I ever saw. Just that bus station, or train station. And so on the way in, I said, so what does Torrella de Montgrí mean? And he said, it means Old Castle of the Gray Mountain. And I said, oh, okay. So we get there, it's late, I'm exhausted, And he said, well, here's your room. He took me up and showed me my room, the studio. And it was nice, you know, it was an old building. Well, everything in the town is old and incredibly old. And I wake up the very next morning and I walk out my little balcony patio thing and I look up and there's this huge castle up on this mountain, right? You know, I was like, oh, well, old Castle of the Gray Mountain, there it is, you know. It was an incredible experience. Just, I didn't do a lot of art, but I did a lot of looking and, you know, hiking. And it was a 10-minute walk to the ocean, 10-minute walk up to that castle. It was just amazing. I was there for 2 months, and they were great. They took me, they would have a car, obviously. But, you know, my first night there, I saw these, I was looking up at the ceiling, and it was this kind of arched ceiling, and there was these twigs sticking out of the ceiling. And so the next morning, I said, so what's with the sticks, or the twigs sticking out of the ceiling? He said, oh, well, that's how they make arches. They would take willow trees and, you know, weave them in and out and make an arch and then pack it with stucco. And I'm like, how old is this building? He said, your building is the oldest one on the street. They had 2 buildings, mine and theirs, and tiny little buildings. He said, yours was built in 1290. And I remember telling him how I had this 100-year-old building in Memphis. You know, I said 1290. I was like, what? And I said, well, he said, we're in the newer building. Ours was built in 15-something. I'm going, you know, it was just, it was such an eye-opener how new America is, you know.
Right. Now, you were saying that you didn't do a lot of art while you were there, but you did a lot of hiking and a lot of looking. What was your like typical day like?
Oh, first thing I'd do, it became my job to go buy bread every morning at the local in town. It was about a 2-3 minute walk. The town is just basically a few streets and a city square. Buildings, bakeries on all 4 corners and of the little town. And so every morning I'd walk, it was only about a 5-minute walk to the town square, and there'd be these ladies on the corners in front of their doors. And I thought, oh, so I walk in the first morning. Oh, this incredible, you know, breads and fresh vegetable, fresh everything was just like picked the day before or something. And so I bought these loaves of bread baked overnight. They were like 50 cents, you know, for these incredible baguettes of bread. And so every morning I had to go to a different one because they'd be standing out there, arms folded, like looking like, we got bread over here too. You know? So it was such a difference from, you know, living in Memphis. It was just, you know, I just loved it. I fell in love with the place.
But, you know, I mean, it to me, listening to you talk about that, it totally rhymes with the story that you were telling me when we first came in here a couple of weeks ago, when you were saying that you would go to the arcade every morning and you would get a cup of coffee and that would be it, and you would sit and read for an hour.
Right.
And it seems like that kind of routine is sort of an important one for you.
Yeah.
Was that where that kind of routine started, or had you been doing that forever?
No, I'd been doing that forever.
Yeah.
And there was coffee in the shops, but no place to sit and drink it. You know, it was strictly just stores.
Now, when you were there, were you taking a lot of pictures? Were you drawing? Were you just sort of taking this information in?
I was drawing. I took a camera, a little digital camera, one of the very first ones. You know, in 2003. They weren't very advanced. So I bought this little digital camera. It came with a little card. And about halfway through the trip, it just stopped working. And at one point, it got really hot. And I thought, whoa, is the battery like melting down in this thing or something? So I stopped using it. I went to town and I bought just a little film camera, the cheapest little film, point and shoot that I could buy. And so I remember I got back when we took it. The guy that ran Michael Deneff, he said, I have no Photoshop. We'll take it down there and see if they can fix it. So they took the little card out and they said, we can't do anything with this. This is broken. This camera's not gonna, it was a cheap little camera. And so they said you can call the company that made the card when you get back to America. Just call the company that made the card. I can't remember what brand it was. Just one of those little chip cards, So I remember when I got back, I called the company. I can't remember what company it was, but they said, well, just mail it to us. And that company sent me back a whole stack of printed photos from that card. They somehow managed to save the photos off of that card. And they sent me another card with all those pictures, but they also printed them.
Wow.
And sent me little 3x5 prints of all my pictures.
Now, what kind of things were you looking at? What kind of things were in the scene?
Oh, just the architecture. This town still had almost 3/4 of its original wall around it.
Wow.
Because it was so close to the sea. Pirates would come in and raid. Pirates would raid these little towns on the coast.
Yeah, it was a problem in 1290.
Yeah. And so they're part of their wall. You could walk around the wall, and part of it adjoined that castle. But they had one around the sea part, and you could just walk around on their wall, and, it was just, everything about the town was just so incredible, Most of the wall had been taken down because, they weren't worried about it. But about 3/4 of it was still there. Wow. In sections.
So now you were there for 2 months? No.
About 2 months.
About 2 months. And so what was going on back home then? You just left the building and the business for 2 months?
Yep. Yeah. John and not John and Tom, but Coleman and John Jones were still renting their spaces.
Right.
So they, and Lauren had by that time moved out. She had gone to school.
Right.
And so, all I did was just basically shut off my appliances and went to Spain for a couple months.
Okay, so you go to Spain and then you come back, and then I would imagine that would be a time of great renewal.
Yeah, and that's when I really started painting a lot.
Now, talk to me about the paintings from that time.
They were mostly a lot of horizontal lines. And that part of that was a trip to Acapulco that I took with a girl that I was dating at the time, and or earlier. And we stayed in Acapulco. Actually, we stayed in that hotel where they filmed the Elvis movie and the cliff divers. And our balcony of our hotel room looked out on where they dove every night, jumped off those cliffs every night. And so, Acapulco is almost an entirely vertical town, And how I translate that into horizontal lines, I'm not sure. But I'd already been doing a lot of horizontal stuff.
And if I remember right, you were using unusual materials at the time. What kind of things were you making the paintings out of?
Well, I wasn't using a whole lot of conventional, like oil paints or acrylic paints, but I had them. But I was using a lot of spackling, kind of. There's this one type of spackling that dries super hard and is not soft like spackling is. Mm-hmm. And I used and acrylic paint. And at first I started using oils, but it didn't really blend with this spackling stuff. They didn't like each other that much. One was basically water-based, and it didn't really work with the oil-based, so I gave up on the oil paint and just used acrylics for actual color places. But a lot of them were very, monotone. There were a lot of just whites and a few lines of color. No big areas of color.
Now, what about? I mean, one of the things I think about a lot when I think about being in Memphis is being around other people who are also painters.
Yeah.
Were you kind of alone in that space, or was it one of those things where people would come and you would have studio visits, or did you feel a kinship?
I was pretty isolated.
Yeah.
I mean, people that knew me could come over.
Sure.
And I still have my print shop set up upstairs, and Anna Santier, she came over a lot, and I tried at one point. I thought about it, trying to do a printmaking thing. Have people come in and print, but nobody really seemed too interested in it. So I just kind of gave up on that.
Right. Now, what kind of things were you? I mean, I'm thinking about the different phases of my life and the different people that I was looking at and thinking about at different times of my life. Were there people that you were looking at or thinking about or drawing inspiration from in terms of your practice?
No, not too much. I can't really remember any influential people for what I was doing. I had a lot of favorite artists, obviously, but I was just, I don't know, overcome with these horizontal lines for some reason. And just, I told David one time when I first started showing him some of the work, I said, every morning I get out and I walk up and down the bluff. It was my kind of habit. And, from the bluff, you look down and you see Riverside Drive, and you look out, you see Tomley Park, and then you see the water, and then you see the West Memphis shoreline, and then you see their West Memphis tree line, and it made just, if I would stand on the bluff and just look out and take a picture, it'd just be a series of lines on top of each other.
Right.
And that's basically what the inspiration was. So I always thought of them as landscapes, but because that's what's the landscape that I saw,
right,
was just continuous lines stacked on one another.
Right.
Even if you took a picture of it, they would look like that,
Yeah.
So.
And so you're there at your space, and then you close down second floor,
Yeah.
and then you sort of split the building, and then you have your section there. What was it in your head, like, as you were making that big change? You knew you were going to be able to keep part of the building.
Yeah.
And so how did you decide to break it down?
Well, like I said, my apartment was on the whole third floor. And after the elevator incident and the lawsuit, I was basically forced to sell the building. I couldn't pay the lawyer fees and what my eventual money was going to be without just selling part of the building. So I sold 3/4 of the building, and we divided it vertically. So I had the whole back quarter of the building, and John Jones, who was architect renting from me at the time, he said, well, if you're going to sell it, let me know. And he said, I've got a partner that we could probably buy it. So they bought it, and it was a disappointment to lose it, but I didn't have a choice.
Right.
And it worked out okay, because I still have 5,000 square feet of space. So I moved and I kept my equipment. I don't build furniture anymore, but I built all my stretchers, and I built a lot of furniture for my daughter. And so I still have a metal shop and a wood shop, a full wood shop in the basement, and most of my metal tools in the first floor. And, so I still have that. And but yeah, I have a good studio space, and and then third floor is my living room and kitchen, and it's much better. I didn't need all that space.
Now, just out of curiosity, and this was a question that I asked Peter Sanjan once, and it was the funniest thing. So the question is, what art by other people do you have in your house? And then maybe talk a little bit about it. But the funny thing was, when I talked to Peter, I said, well, Peter, you're a potter. My favorite thing about my daily routine is going in and choosing the mug that I'm going to drink my morning espresso from. Like that. That's like one of my favorite things. And I was like, so tell me, Peter, what's going on at your place? And he was like, nothing. I don't have anything. And it was the craziest thing. I just remember saying, like, wait, what? And so, but I know that you have work by other people at your place. And so I'm curious, what are some things that you have at the house that are particularly important for you?
Well, I've got upstairs, and I have a little deck up on the roof, and a little small enclosed area where I have a whole art wall, which you're part of, and Brian Sharp. Yeah, we figured that out. And then who else have I got? I got Terry, and I got two of mine, and a Macy Craddock, and let's see, who else is up there? Pat DeGuerra, remember him? Got a little piece by him. And there's not a lot. There's 6 or 7 up there.
Now, what's the piece of Terry's that you have?
I've got just a small little drawing of hers, and then on my third floor, in my living room, I have another little small. She was doing these. She'd drawn on vellum, a little drawing on vellum, and then she put these. I think Greeley had made these mounts for her, but they stand off the wall about 6 inches or so, and they're little plaster boxes with the vellum drawing inside. And I got one of those. And I don't have any big pieces of hers. But yeah, I've got a pretty good collection of people's art.
And then what about the Macy piece?
It's a small black on a paper on her bag, paper bag piece, but it's only about 5 or 6 inches square, or maybe no, it's about 8 by 10 maybe, and it's before she started doing the floral stuff she's doing now. She was doing houses after Katrina. She was doing these collapsed houses and devastation pictures after Katrina, and it's similar to those, although it's not a collapsed thing. It's just an old, kind of a house shape, but it's all black and just paper. It's pretty nice. And what else have I got up there? Carla Lohmeyer. Do you remember Carla Lohmeyer?
Yeah, Carla taught the summer drawing and composition class, I think, that I took at U of M.
Yeah. Oh, did she?
Yeah.
She worked for MCA. She was their recruiter.
Okay.
And she and I, after my divorce, I moved into this apartment just about the same time that I was working on the building. I had bought the building and was working on it, and hadn't moved down there yet. And so she lived underneath me in an apartment building, and we started dating. And so we took a nice trip to Florida one summer, and she was great. But now she lives in New York. Oh. And she's married, lives in New York, and actually I had a show a few years ago up there, and she and her husband came to the opening. It was good to see her. Yeah, it was fun.
And then, also, one thing I'm thinking about with your work is the changes that have happened over the years. And if we could just return to some of the work a little bit. So I remember when you were making the pieces that felt sort of strongly black and white. And if I remember right, the black, was it a building material of some kind?
It was roofing tar.
Roofing tar, right. Roofing tar paired with that super hard spackle that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And then in my brain, I sort of remember a period where almost all of the darkness was removed, or rather the darkness was underneath, and then it sort of became covered.
Right.
And again...
Yeah, I started out, I've almost always painted on wood, on panels, and birch plywood panels, sometimes masonite panels. And when I went from masonite panels, which are that dark brown, to the birch plywood, I just, I thought, I got to paint these dark brown, because that's what I was used to starting with, a dark background. And so I actually had Farrell Calhoun mix up a paint for me called Masonite. I took him a piece of Masonite. I said, match this color. And I had an account with them anyway from the furniture business.
Yeah.
And I was in there all the time. And they said, what are you going to call it? And I said, let's call it mahogany or Masonite. And so they labeled the can Masonite. I've been using it ever since. And but yeah, because I started staring at that light wood, and I thought, I gotta get rid of this. I gotta get it dark and start dark. I don't know why, but I could see the spackling better and stuff when I'm troweling it on. Because I pretty much would cover the whole surface with this patching compound. It's like spackling, but it's harder. It's like drywall cement, but it's harder.
Okay.
It dries more permanent.
Okay. And I mean, also as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about your paintings, I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot is just the physicality of them and how the making of them factors into it. And then that, as I was getting ready this morning, I was listening to how you were talking about printmaking and the printmaking process and the physicality of it. And can you talk a little bit about how some of that process has changed over the years? I mean, I know you have these sort of waves where you'll sort of move to or away from looseness or tightness.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about how the process has changed for you?
It's really, I can't think of any definite period where something just radically changed, but I can just, I started, just with the roofing tar stuff and the spackling. It's easy to manipulate. You can put it on thick and you can put it on thin. You can scrape it off if you don't like it. It's now when you start mixing acrylic paint into this spackling, it becomes hard, and you could, if you with enough water and scrubbing, you could probably scrub through it eventually, but it gets pretty durable. And then if I finish with a clear coat of a vinyl something or other, not sure what the ingredient is on that, but it's thick, so it's physical from the start. I put it on with big palette knives and drywall knives, and I can scrape through it, and it's real workable up until over next morning it's going to be hard. So you're kind of limited. You can carve into it though.
Right.
You can scrape it off and you can chisel into it. It's I don't know. It just really works for me. And I could get a lot of texture built up, and the texture would create shadows, and I just always have been surface oriented, with the paintings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I think about coming to visit you, I think about the tools that you have in your studio that I do not have in my studio. You know, like you have
like chisels.
Yeah, chisels and all of the knives,
big painting knives,
and then also the hardware that you have. Like you had this pulley system that you had set up to help you move these enormous heavy panels.
Yeah, those panels got pretty heavy when they were 8 feet by 7 by 8 feet.
Right.
I haven't been doing those really large ones lately, but I'd have to build those in 2 parts because the plywood is 4 by 8. So I'd get 2 sheets, and it was convenient doing so many horizontal lines because you could always hide the and I'd always cut them like 3 and 4 or something, so there wasn't a line dead center. And you could hide it with that, and with all the spackling, you couldn't really tell. But they were actually 2 paintings bolted together, and it makes moving them a lot easier.
Right.
But once they're bolted together, you can't tell.
Right. And then also thinking about you and your connection to landscape and how the paintings have changed, especially thinking about that most recent show where there was so much pouring and so much color. What do you think? How does that factor into it?
I'm not sure how all that came about. It just, after doing horizontal lines for so long, it was just a natural thing for me to put in some strong verticals at some point. And I did that, 10 years ago. I did some paintings with some really strong, they were really more vertical oriented than horizontal. And I still have 2 of them over my desk. They're still 2 of my favorite paintings. But it just, I don't know, the last show I did was really sort of just completely different. It was a lot of little small marks, and I would carve into scrape out some of the compound when it was still kind of wet, and it would make just really nice little square holes in the painting I could paint in, and it just became a lot more animated, a lot of little things moving around the canvas instead of just steady lines and stuff.
Now those parts, how do you think about them? I mean, obviously you're thinking about them in kind of the physical way, but then also the pictorial way. And you were saying like little guys, like how do you think about them? What place are they in your brain?
I just wanted to make again. I wanted to make little small groups of statements or something,
right?
Parts of a painting, and that's why I titled the show "Tall Tales and Short Stories," and everything seemed to be like I've been looking at some Egyptian hieroglyphic stuff, and thinking, how'd they come up with all those images that were words, basically?
Right.
And that sort of, I thought, was just, what if you just broke all those up and just put them all over the place, And that's basically what I was thinking when I did that. But, I like those paintings, but I'm not doing anything like that right now. But I'm not sure what I'm doing right now.
So how does that, I mean, just out of curiosity, talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'm kind of hesitant to talk about it because it's, all I'll say about it is I'm doing realistic still lifes right now.
Okay.
Like really realistic still lives.
I love how you say it. It's like, I've started, killing small children, eating their arms.
Right.
It's like you've suddenly declared that you are doing something horrible, in the world.
And it's not. What it is an incredible challenge.
No, and so talk about that. I'm super curious because, I mean, every once in a while, I'll be like, let's paint a tree or whatever, or like I teach drawing, and so I kind of have to use that part of my brain.
Yeah.
But you're doing it on purpose, in the studio. So talk about that a little bit. What was the impulse there?
I just, after I do a show like I did at David's, I just, it was like Gregory comes over and we haul all these big paintings out, and all of a sudden my studio is just empty, And it's such a relief, really, to get it out of there, because I've been living with this stuff for a year now, and I just, I'm ready to have it go. And so then, the very next day, I just started drawing a picture of a bird nest for some reason. And I kind of liked it. I thought, I'll do a print.
No, wait, was there a bird nest sitting in the studio? Like we find stuff and we kind of,
one,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
It was pretty destroyed, but, it was enough intact. And then I looked at some pictures of bird nests, and I thought, I'm just going to draw a bird nest. I'm going to spend some time just drawing a realistic bird nest.
Now, would this be, because for me, like every once in a while in my sketchbook, I'll be there and I'll be struck by an object and I'll draw the object to the best of my ability or whatever. And so like that happens every once in a while. Is that something that you would normally do in your practice, just
Not
every
very
once in a
much,
while?
Not very much.
So you recognize that it was a strange impulse at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I used to draw really well. I drew a lot, not super great, but I could draw pretty well, And I just realized, I don't draw anymore. I visualize these paintings kind of in drawings, kind of sketching black darks and lights, but I didn't really draw before the painting. Didn't do studies on paper for the paintings. I would just get in there and start moving some stuff around,
Right.
But I just started, I've got a couple of friends that are printmakers that he was always an abstract painter, a guy I went to school with. And now he was always an incredible lithographer, but he's been doing these lithographs. He and his wife both do really good lithography. And he's been doing these little realistic drawings of like snakes and frogs, and they live out in the country on a little lake, and they have a big printmaking studio. And I said, man, Andy and I used to draw all the time. We were in the printmaking room, And so I just started kind of drawing stuff again and kind of got into it. So right now, what I'm doing is painting these still lifes and they're sort of, man, it's not easy.
No, for me, that's super interesting because you're talking about going from a process that's really sort of tied in a lot of ways to the old school abstract expressionists, and that the object is a document of the experience of making this painting, and especially for you, the physicality of it, it seems to really be the driving force in terms of where these paintings come from and what directs them. And so now you're throwing in this other object, this other thing that you are also in control of. And so how are you setting these still lives up, just out of curiosity?
They're pretty basic. I built a little box, a light box thing, like you're supposed to. And I started looking all over the house for stuff to put in there.
So what'd you put in there?
Well, right now I'm doing one of tools. I have a lot of tools. So I've got a whole table full of tools just sitting there. And sometimes I work from them sitting there, but I always take a picture. I almost like painting from the pictures better because it's already flat. It takes that, and all that. So I don't know. I just thought, when I started drawing that bird nest, I just thought, man, I used to be really good at this. I'm not so good at it anymore.
So some of it was the challenge.
Yeah.
Some of it was like,
all of it's a challenge.
Can I still do this?
Yeah. Basically, I'm thinking, I started looking at a lot of still lifes online and the Brooks and.
So like, what kind of things were you looking at?
I started out with just looking at old Dutch still lifes,
Okay.
And they're incredible. I mean, I'm thinking, could I do that? I just don't think I could do that.
Well, I mean, it's amazing to me because those are the things that we walk past a lot of times in museums. We're like, oh, there's another still life with some of those tulips or whatever. But once your brain clicks in on them, you really see them.
Yeah. And when you try to do one, you know, I could spend an hour trying to paint a little thing of grapes and not get very far. So I started out small. I started out with my first painting like this was of, I had a cat named Molasses. When I sold the building over to John and Tom, we moved everything. I was moving all my stuff. I built my new studio, and she was getting pretty old, and she would lay in the studio in the corner where I painted. And I woke up one morning, I walked out, and I said, "Hey, Molasses, let's go outside." And she didn't move. And I walked over there, and she had died. And man, you know, she just laid down here and died. How weird is that, you know? So I didn't know what to do with her, so I took her, I put her in a shopping bag, and I took her across the street to the train station. And there's a big train yard, it's a big yard hill up there with a lot of grass and a lot of area by the train tracks. And I just dug a hole and I buried her. And about 4 or 5 years after that, I was up there walking the dog one day, and I looked down at the train tracks. I always look at the train tracks for rocks and stuff because there's just all kinds of incredible rocks around the train track. And I looked down and I see this little cat skull, this little skull, and it's about 10 feet from where I buried Molasses. And Molasses always had a snaggle tooth. She had one tooth that came out above her lip. And I reached down, I picked up this little skull, and there was that little tooth, that big tooth that was on the outside. And I thought, this is Molasses' skull. So I scooped it up and took it home. That was the first thing I painted when I decided to do a still life. And I did it life size, so it's just a tiny little painting. It took me about 3 days to paint that thing. I was like, man, it's a lot harder than it looks.
Now, what was it that made you decide to do that? I mean, I totally understand the impulse to grab it and take it home. Yeah. But what about the impulse?
I grabbed it and took it home, but I didn't paint it until years later.
Oh, okay. And so what was it that made you say, oh, I'm going to paint this now?
Well, when I decided to do a still life, I started looking at still lifes. And, of course, you know, half of those things have skulls in them.
Right.
You know, the Vanitas business. And I'm like, okay, I got a skull. I know exactly the skull I'm going to paint, you know. So I sat down, I painted a gourd, one of my bird gourds that had broken and had white paint. You know, I always paint the gourds white, and the paint flakes off. So I took one of the gourds that was cracked and put the skull in front of it and sat down and painted that. And, you know, it turned out okay. I thought, hey, I could do this. I could do this. If I did it 2 or 3 more times, they'd probably be really good, you know.
I mean, because that's such a radical shift.
Yeah.
I love it, and to me, it's so satisfying and fun, and I love how this is like a different part of your brain and how you're thinking about these.
I tell you, it's a whole different way of thinking about how to do a painting.
It's almost like starting over.
It's completely starting over, except I know how to use a brush. I know how to mix paint and color. But even the mixing the color, I mean, you know, it can take me 20 minutes to get the color right on just a little tiny patch of red, you know, because I'm just not used to thinking that way.
No, what are you noticing? Like in terms of, is it?
No, I look a lot harder.
Right. Well, for me, I mean, the reason I ask is, so like when me and my students are working on a still life, or drawing in a different way,
Right.
or working in a different way, I'll talk to them about how do they feel exhausted. Are they exhausted because they're using a part of their brain that they don't normally use?
Yeah.
And so, do you notice that as well in terms of your brain?
I drew so much at one point in my life that that part of it, I'm not having that part of it I can get right. There's always erasers.
Right.
But mixing the color and putting it on there, and then getting that right, getting the light right, getting the shadows right. It's just like, man, I just don't think about painting like this, and now I do. And I used to think, I just used to think of the big overall painting,
Now, how big are these still lifes?
They're not very big. They're 36 by, the biggest one's 36 by 48.
Oh.
So not tiny, but yeah.
Okay.
The skull in the first one was only about 12 inches square.
Right.
I did a bunch of little 12-inch squares of stuff.
Now, in the studio, are they out where you can see them?
What I usually do is set up a still life,
Yeah.
and then I photograph it.
Okay.
Because it's really hard to light stuff and have it sitting there where you can see it and then work around it.
Yeah, especially at your place, because you have that time of day where the sun just pours in.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to keep a consistent light on something. So what I do is I photograph it, and then I put it in Procreate or something, a paint program, and crop it and get the composition that I want, and which is basically what I took, how I set it up, just a photograph. But then I can play around with some background colors and stuff, because I just photograph them against a white wall, and the backgrounds are almost always dark. So I can take a photograph of them and put them on a back, make the whole background black, and work from that. And then I just have a little monitor sitting by my easel that I look at and paint from. Because with the light changing so much, and I just can't. I would be able to paint for an hour a day if I was doing it from life.
Right.
Like, it's just hard to. I guess so much sunlight coming in there, it would just colors are constantly changing.
Right.
If I look at the photograph, I just go by that.
Mm-hmm. Now, how long have you been doing these?
I've been doing these about 6 months, maybe 4 or 5 months.
And then how many do you have?
I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm on my 5th one.
Okay. And so do you have the paintings out where you see them and you look at them and you sort of reflect on them?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm
Nobody's seen them.
Oh yeah.
Nobody has seen them.
Yeah.
Except me.
To me, that's so interesting, Don. I mean, I love how. So like, for me, when I'm going through a shift in the studio, I sort of frame it the same way that like Larry Edwards would frame it. When you would talk to Larry and he would say, "Oh, something's happening in the studio. I don't know what it is." And so it's this kind of mystery thing that sort of slowly plays itself out, and then you slog through it and you work through it and you make a bunch of really bad, or I make a bunch of really bad stuff, and then something clicks, and then I'm like, okay. And so in your brain though, I love that image of you deciding to sit down and draw this bird's nest because it sort of called to you, or that you were interested in it.
Yeah.
But it's such a radically different part of your brain. Were you working on what we would think of as Don paintings at the same time, or did you just like totally shift gears?
I totally shifted gears. And I do that when I finish a show and of course at the end I'm really trying to get everything finished and get them ready to pick up and be gone. And then it's just like, get them out of my head, forget about them. And this time I did it, and I was like, well, and usually I would start right in, okay, what am I going to do next, And this time I just kind of thought, I have no idea what to do next, And that's when I started drawing that nest. I thought, man, this is hard. This is harder to do than I remember. And I used to be good at this, so I'm going to just get better at it again, you know. And so I did a little etching of the nest, and I did a little etching of a bird. And, you know, that etching is not the best way because the method is so hard, you know. Mm-hmm. A needle scratching into a piece of copper is not the best way to draw, but it's a challenge. So, so that's, and all of a sudden now I'm doing still lifes.
You know, it's funny when you say that. I totally hear Beth, you know, when Beth does her talk, you know, Beth said something about, I can't remember how she phrased it, but it was funny. But it was something like, you know, I'm doing the opposite of what I thought I would be doing, you know, at this point. I never wanted to be a flower painter or something like that. And she would sort of like frame it like this sort of, you know, this derogatory term, you know, a flower painter, you know. Yeah. And
I have more respect than ever for realist painters. Because I've always dismissed it as being not my thing, you know. And it's incredibly different, you know. Choosing colors and putting the color, you know, I'll change the color if I think it helps the painting. Mm-hmm. I don't care if the little oil can is one shade of red, if another shade of red works better.
Right.
But the shadows have to be right, and the highlights have to be right. And if they're not right, the painting's not good, you know. So I do take liberty with the colors, you know. I'll find something green just to have some green in the painting, you know. And I know I got something in this house that's green I can use, you know. So, you know, but even if it's not the exact right green, I'll change it. But I still have to look at it to get the highlights and the shadows and the shape and everything.
Now, are there people that you're looking at? I mean, because for me, when I, like, for example, I've been thinking a lot about portraits lately. Yeah. And so
that's what crossed my mind the other day. Do I have the nerve to do a portrait?
Well, thinking about those portraits, you know, for me, my heroes were always figurative painters. You know, like I always really loved Frank Auerbach's thick, you know, juicy, meaty paintings, and I always liked Lucian Freud for the same reason, and Francis Bacon for the same reason, and now thinking about like Dana Schutz and Lisa Yuskavage, and I mean, most of the people that I'm really drawn to are these figurative painters, and so anyway, so I noticed myself looking at them more and thinking about that. So
I look at a lot of still life paintings, a lot of different styles, and I go back and forth from loose to more detail, or you know, and mine aren't like super realism. They're not, you know, they're not like photographic realism. They got some texture to them and some brush work, you know. But I don't, you know, it was tempting just to do these real brushy, you know. I thought, no, I'm gonna try to make this metal look like metal and the wood look like wood, and that's hard to do with a lot of thick paints, you know, but you can do it. It's tricky.
For me, the thing that I remember is, so like, say for example, recently I've also been thinking about Mary Sims a lot, and I did a painting that was drawn from a Mary Sims painting, and the other day on Facebook, you know, it tells you what happened, you know, 8 years ago, and it was that painting, and I remember looking at it, and I remember thinking, when I made that painting, that it was possible for me to mess it up. You know, like I think in some ways there's something about the way I paint or the way my brain works in the studio where there is a certain level of, I know that one day I'll make a painting that gets this right, you know, and I don't have to get it right exactly right now. I just need to get it right enough so that I feel satisfied with it. And so, but now that you're doing this in the studio, you have that same kind of
now I want to get it right. I don't want to say good enough.
Right.
And you know, that's and I've always kind of been that way. I'd look at the painting, and almost every painting I've ever finished, there's some part I have a doubt about.
Right.
Know?
Right.
Like, not like I know there's something wrong here, but I don't know what to do to fix it.
Right.
So I'm just gonna let it go. but I still think about it.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's kind of like people, like as wonderful and fantastic as my grandfather was, there were things that were problematic, And so it's like the same thing about paintings. Like you look at those paintings and you say, yeah, there's more good about it than there's bad,
Right.
And so like I'll hang out with this one for a little while, But when you're painting something when you're painting something that's real and it's sitting there and it's looking at you, it'll tell you how it's wrong.
I know, and it's that you get that feedback as you look at it and you think it's not right, but I don't know exactly what is wrong about it. So you just keep painting.
And it's also, for me, one of those things where I think of myself as a grown-up, like I know how to do these things.
Right.
And for me to like look at a Vermeer painting and say, I literally have no idea how that person put those pigments on that surface. Like I don't understand it. It's like butter or light or something. I can't even, like some of those Dutch still lifes, you are like, oh yeah, okay, so they did this and then they put on a glaze and they wiped it.
And you can read their brushstrokes and thought, okay, they're just following what they see.
Right.
But some of them, I mean, it's like, wow, these guys see really good.
Right. And obviously this is one of the things too that I'm always curious about when we're doing these interviews, and one of the things I love about being in a city for as long as I've been in there is that I get to be old with other people who are also old. Yeah. And so like, is that something that also factors in your brain? Like I think of, my older friends like Nancy and Beth and all the other people that I'm around all the time, they're at the top of their game. Like they are certainly making better paintings than they were when they were in their 20s or 30s. Right. And so is that something that you're thinking about too as you're working on these paintings?
I don't think about that too much. I don't compare. I don't compare to anything.
You don't think about 28-year-old Don?
I look at these things and I'm thinking, I could, back when I was in undergrad, I could have done this better, probably.
Okay.
Because when we were drawing those still lifes in drawing class, man, I could knock them out. I could knock those drawings out. Big old thing of roses, I could draw them like crazy. And then 30 years later, I've been painting abstract paintings my whole life. I can't remember the last time I sat down and drew something and made it look like what I was drawing on purpose. Until that cat's go.
Right. Well, also I'm interested, like I think about my practice as almost like a diet, like there's, I'll go in there and I'll have the meat and the potatoes, and you were talking about bread earlier.
Right.
And then again, thinking about like, sometimes when you just walk in and there's just a bunch of vegetables, you're like, oh, right, there's vegetables, and I'm supposed to eat vegetables, and that feels really good, and that's kind of a nourishing thing, and now my body feels right. Is that kind of how you're thinking about these still life paintings? It's like something that you suddenly recognize that you just didn't have in your diet anymore, and that suddenly your body is craving broccoli?
I don't know. I think if I craved anything, it was drawing, And after doing that little bird nest, I thought, maybe I should, why not put some color in here and see if I could still, see how really if I am an artist or not, I looked at all my other paintings as challenges too, but I was so much more comfortable with them because I had evolved into them,
Right.
And this is just such a switch, I kind of can't wait to get back to it,
Right. That's such a great place to be. I mean, it's such an important...
It's frustrating because I think, I can spend 2 hours painting a little part of a can, and I'm thinking, I'm not getting very far here. I've painted this a different shade of red about 8 times now. But and then there's sometimes I just say, I'm not going to worry about if it's exact the red that the can is. I want my painting overall. I'm still thinking color matters in a painting, and colors should speak to one another. So, I'll paint it like it is unless I think, it needs to be a little redder than orange, because the thing it's next to is going to be, even if it's not painted yet, I can tell in my head that's not going to work.
Well, there's also a part of me that...
So there's still some manipulation going around.
And I see you, I would imagine you walking down or going down to the art center and then going to a completely different section of the store.
Yeah.
Like, were you suddenly sort of like going in and saying, oh, yeah, well, what's that one?
Yeah. But I've bought a lot of brushes.
Right. You got rid of the knives.
I've got way more brushes than I'm ever going to use. And I just buy kind of the cheapest sables I can use because they don't last long no matter how good they are.
Right.
And so I just buy, half a dozen of one brush because I know by into 2 paintings they're going to be trash. And I still use a palette knife a little bit, but I'm really trying to not to drift back into total abstraction again with these things,
Right.
Even though it'd be easier for me to think that way, to make a lot of flashy marks, and I can still make it look like a decent painting. But I just want to see if I can do it and be satisfied with it.
Right. And it also makes me think about, like, in my brain, I always fantasize about how Roy Lichtenstein's children, after he died, went into the basement and then took all of those other paintings that he had been making over the years and took them out and burned them so that no one would ever see them, because those, the Ben Day dot ones were the most important and valuable for their assets. But I love this idea that you have this, it's not a secret. I mean, you've told me about it, the couple of times that I've seen you. Yeah. And so, like, surely it's like a thing that's in the world, but I love this idea of the secret paintings, or the paintings that are sort of behind the scenes.
Yeah, nobody's seen them.
Yeah.
One girl that I kind of just started dating has seen them.
Has seen them.
That's it. My daughter hasn't even seen them.
Not like this.
And, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm having fun doing it. I like doing it. So, yeah.
That's a perfect place to stop.
Artists want to do art, one form or another.
Is there anything that we missed?
I can't think of anything unless I do something totally different tomorrow. If I do, we'll do another interview.
You start throwing pots.
Yeah, throwing pots.
I'm working on these tea pictures that I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
All right, Don, thank you.
All right, thank you, Hamlet. Enjoyed it.
And that was the second of 2 interviews that I did with Don Estes. That interview was recorded on November 15th, 2024. Please join us next week when we have another interview. Until then, thank you for listening.